So, have you ever noticed how the spaces in a film make you feel? I mean, not just the actors or the plot, but, the actual rooms, the buildings, the whole atmosphere they inhabit.
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. A huge empty ballroom, or maybe a really cramped, cluttered apartment, or even those stark, imposing concrete buildings you sometimes see.
Right. They aren't just inert backdrops, are they? They feel like they're actively doing something, like silent storytellers.
Precisely. They can whisper secrets or reveal something crucial about a character without a single line of dialogue. And sometimes, honestly, they feel like they're driving the narrative itself.
Yeah, it's this really profound layer of storytelling.
Mm.
And it often works on you subconsciously, doesn't it? But its power to shape how we experience the film is just immense.
He's hit on it.
Mhm.
So today, in this deep dive, that's exactly what we're unpacking, this fascinating interplay between architecture and cinema.
Our mission is pretty clear. We want to explore how these built environments, these spaces, aren't just scenery, but they actually become characters in their own right,
Yeah.
shaping our emotions, revealing character traits, even pushing the plot forward.
Mm-hmm. And we've pulled together a really interesting stack of your sources for this one. We've got everything from, architectural reviews of iconic films, The Shining obviously comes to mind,
Oh, yeah.
to deeper discussions on things like German Expressionism, which is visually just stunning, and the whole vibe of brutalist architecture in film.
And even some academic papers looking at how some techniques can actually teach architecture students, right?
Yeah.
Stuff like cinematic pedagogy and the architectural promenade.
Exactly. We're going to try and dissect how directors and production designers, even architects themselves, deliberately use space to create these profound psychological impacts.
Hopefully we can give you some of those aha moments that might just change how you watch films from now on. We'll explore architecture as a critical storytelling tool, how different styles get used to convey specific themes.
And even flip it around, how filmmaking techniques might influence the way architects think about designing real spaces. It's a fascinating two-way street.
Okay, so let's start there. When we talk about a building becoming a character, what does that actually mean? Is there like a fundamental concept filmmakers use to bring that idea to life?
There is, yeah. It's a really core concept in filmmaking called mise en scène. It's a French term. Translates directly to setting the stage.
Okay.
In film, it refers to the deliberate arrangement of, everything that appears in front of the camera. It's
Yeah.
not just about having stuff in the shot. It's about where it's placed, how it interacts, the narrative weight it carries.
Right. So it's what makes film more than just moving pictures. It turns it into purposeful art. You think about it. Every prop, every light source where the actors stand, every single element is chosen.
And when those elements work together, they don't just fill the frame. They instantly create an atmosphere, evoke a specific emotion in you, the audience, often without you even realizing why you're feeling it.
And the sort of umbrella term for this whole visual aspect, the entire look of a film, that's production design.
That's it. Production design covers everything.
Yeah.
The set designs, the locations they choose, down to the smallest props, the costumes the characters wear, even their makeup. It's a huge undertaking.
Wow.
And that collaboration between the production designer and the director, that's absolutely crucial. That's what crafts the entire visual world of the film, making sure every detail serves the story they're telling.
So next time you're watching a film, you should maybe think about this. How does that perfectly designed set beyond just looking cool or aesthetically pleasing? How does it immediately tell you about the film's visual style, its mood?
Yeah, or the time period, the geographical location, even the socioeconomic status of the characters or deep personality traits. It's all subtly embedded in the environment, silently guiding how you perceive things.
Okay, let's make this concrete. You mentioned The Shining earlier.
Mm-hmm.
The Overlook Hotel has got to be one of the ultimate examples of architecture as a truly malevolent character, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's no better case study. Stanley Kubrick had this incredibly meticulous, deliberate approach. He worked closely with the production designer, Roy Walker.
And Kubrick specifically said he wanted it to feel authentic, didn't he? Not like a standard spooky movie hotel.
Exactly. He believed the sheer scale, the labyrinthine layout, the huge rooms, that alone would provide an eerie enough atmosphere, as he put it. He didn't need cheap scares built in.
And boy, does it deliver on that. What's really unsettling, I think, is Kubrick's use of deliberate spatial anomalies, that spatial disjunction. Like the interior of the Overlook doesn't actually match its exterior, right? Whether you're looking at the real Timberline Lodge footage or the studio sets.
That's right. It's not an accident, not a continuity error. If
Oh,
you look closely, you realize only one window and one entry or exit actually align logically between shots.
wow.
And even more jarring, different interior parts just don't connect in the way the editing makes you think they connect. It's
Right.
constantly creating these misleading visual assumptions. It subtly disorients you.
So it's not just creepy, it's fundamentally wrong. The geometry is off.
It is a prime example. Think about Danny cycling around on his big wheel on the second floor. The only room that could logically fit within that section he covers is room 237.
No way.
Yeah. It creates this pervasive sense of confusion, this foreboding feeling of an unending maze. It's deliberately designed to make the viewer feel as lost and trapped as the characters, trying to make sense of a space that fundamentally makes no sense.
And you might not consciously register those inconsistencies, the impossibility of them.
Exactly. But your subconscious picks up on it. You feel that something is deeply wrong even if you can't put your finger on it.
And it's not just the layout, is it? It's the colors, the textures. They're used so strategically for psychological impact.
Totally. Kubrick was a master at using vivid colors and rich textures to evoke one primary emotion: fear. Think about the ballroom restroom scene when Jack talks to Grady.
Oh, the red walls.
The blood-red walls, they're not just visually striking, they mirror Jack's sinister shift in mindset. They intensify the suspense. And red becomes this recurring visual motif of danger and madness throughout the film.
And the textures, too, like that carpet.
Oh, that carpet, that unsettling geometric, almost cage-like pattern on the hallway carpet where Danny plays. It's not just a bold design choice from the 70s, it's a visual cue, subtly hinting at impending danger, enhancing that profound sense of foreboding. Every visual choice is a layer, a deliberate psychological nudge.
This whole idea of a labyrinthine horror extends beyond just the impossible corridors, doesn't it? The sheer scale of the hotel.
And the vastness, yeah, towering ceilings, expansive spaces, it physically dwarfs Jack and his family. It accentuates their insignificance, their growing powerlessness. The space itself feels like it's oppressing them.
And then there's the hedge maze. That wasn't even in the book, was it?
No, Kubrick added it for the film, and it perfectly mirrors the hotel's interior labyrinth. It reinforces this idea of the Overlook as an inescapable trap, both physically and, you could argue, historically or psychologically.
Which connects directly to the film's deeper themes, right?
Yeah.
Repetition, cyclical history.
Exactly. Jack's eerie familiarity with the place, Grady's chilling line, "You've always been the caretaker," Jack's frozen fate in the maze, his appearance in that old photograph. It all underlines this idea of an endless, horrifying, repeating cycle.
Even the smaller things, like the repeated phrases Jack types or the twins' invitation to Danny. Come play with us, Danny, forever and ever and ever.
It all emphasizes this horrifying pattern of history repeating itself within those walls.
Kubrick really made the architecture feel alive, almost breathing. His use of the Steadicam, which was pretty innovative at the time.
Right. It wasn't just a technical gimmick. It guides you, the viewer, through that unsettling interior. It emphasizes the vast, dehumanizing scale before the psychological horror really kicks in. The hotel essentially becomes this perceptive entity watching its inhabitants, amplifying the tension in every shot.
It's like the film is playing tricks on your subconscious,
Right.
making you feel things without you even realizing why.
Precisely. Those spatial anomalies, the impossible connections, viewers often don't notice them consciously, but they absolutely affect you subconsciously. They build that pervasive sense of unease.
And he used wide-angle lenses too, didn't he, to make corridors seem endless.
Yeah, to intensify that feeling of confinement, paradoxically, by stretching the space. Corridors appear endless, suggesting imminent danger lurking just around the corner. It's a masterclass in weaponizing architectural design to mess with your perception, mirroring Jack's own descent. The building isn't just a setting, it's the antagonist.
He didn't just use lenses for scale, though. His compositions were often so meticulous, weren't they? That Renaissance-like symmetry dividing the frame.
Absolutely. That symmetry creates its own kind of unease. It can feel unnatural, too perfect. And his commitment to realism in other aspects was astounding. The lighting, for example. He used incredibly powerful studio lights to get realistic daylight effects inside.
So powerful, the set caught fire, I heard.
That's the story. And Kubrick, in his, unyielding pursuit of perfection, apparently just had the entire set rebuilt. That level of dedication to getting the environment exactly right is just phenomenal.
Wow. So the Overlook's architecture, this architecture of terror, it also creates that subtle disjunction between inside and outside, deliberately misleading us. about the layout.
Yeah, that early tour the manager gives the Torrances, the one we experience with them, it feels seamless.
Right.
But those transitions, say from the lobby to the Colorado Lounge or outside to inside, they're achieved through cuts. Often between the real Timberline Lodge exterior and the studio sets, they deliberately omit any logical room-to-room passage.
So you become familiar with individual spaces, but completely disoriented about how they connect.
Yeah.
Which just fosters that growing sense of unease.
Exactly. Ultimately, the Overlook Hotel becomes this unforgettable, malevolent presence. Its labyrinthine symbolism isn't just about being lost. It connects to deeper terrors. The terror of domestic violence, the fear of being trapped, which is certainly what Wendy and Danny experience.
And as Jack loses his grip on reality, his determination to control the space and control his family escalates. It really highlights the sinister potential of architecture to exert power and control.
It makes you realize the true horror often lies within the mundane, familiar elements of our surroundings. A hotel corridor, a pattern on the floor. The set isn't just decoration, it's a silent co-conspirator, revealing truths about characters and plot that dialogue alone never could. It's the ultimate show, don't tell.
Okay, so The Shining is one extreme. If we connect this idea of architecture used symbolically, we absolutely have to talk about German Expressionism, right? A whole different approach.
Definitely. A whole different aesthetic, but equally focused on using space to express internal states. German Expressionism started as an avant-garde movement in painting, around 1905 or so.
And then it spread to other arts. Theater, literature, architecture.
And eventually film. It was a radical departure from realism. The whole point was to express inner turmoil, subjective experience, through external distortion.
And the landmark film everyone points to is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari from 1919-1920.
That's the one. It's a prime example where the entire visual style, the stylization, functions to express the distorted viewpoint of a madman. The film literally becomes a projection of his fractured vision. The world on screen is his perception.
So the German style, as it was called, it emphasized the design, the mise en scène, this uncanny atmosphere, the composition, much more than, say, a traditional story or editing techniques.
Precisely. Herman Worm, one of the key designers on Caligari, famously declared, "The film image must become graphic art." Expressionism abstracted and transformed reality through these intensely stylized techniques.
What were some of those techniques? I picture very strange angles.
Yeah, unexpected, often tilted camera angles, and very little camera movement, which created the sense of rigid, deliberate framing, almost like panels in a comic book.
And the lighting. Very dramatic.
Stark contrasts of light and shadow, high contrast, almost like chiaroscuro painting, used for very dramatic emotional effects, pure white light against pitch black shadows.
And the sets themselves? They look like nightmares brought to life.
They really do. Totally artificial, stylized sets. They were described as paintings come to life. They stripped away realistic details, realistic psychology. Instead, the sets became symbolic diagrams of emotional states, jagged lines, distorted perspectives, leaning walls, painted on shadows visually echoing the characters' internal struggles.
And the acting matched that. Very theatrical.
Overtly theatrical, yeah. Anti-naturalist. Actors moved in jerky, slow, or sometimes sinuous patterns, often wearing heavy, stylized makeup. And crucially, all these elements, sets, lighting, acting, costume, were integrated. They created this unified, overwhelming overall composition. Every part of the frame contributed to the film's unique, unsettling aesthetic.
So the goal wasn't realism at all. It was about getting at the essence of something.
Exactly. Abstracting from realistic details to bring out the essence of a state of being. Expressing a subjective viewpoint. Evoking feelings like mystery, alienation, disharmony, hallucination, dreams, extreme emotional states, destabilization. The goal wasn't to show reality, but to express an inner truth that realism couldn't capture.
It really challenges our basic assumptions about what film is supposed to do, doesn't it? This idea that film only becomes art when it differs from reality.
That was the premise in the 1920s for many of these filmmakers. The thinking was, the world is already there, why repeat it? Film's formative power was seen in its ability to re-signify reality, rework it, not just record it, to construct this self-contained aesthetic, symbolic world of the imagination, radically detached from everyday life.
Did the movement last long?
The peak was relatively short. It shifted towards realism more after 1924, and especially with the arrival of sound cinema after 1928, which demanded a bit more naturalism. But films like Murnau's Faust and Fritz Lang's Metropolis, both from 1926, were kind of the last major gasps of pure expressionism, often with huge production values.
But it left a legacy, didn't it? even if pure expressionism faded.
Oh, absolutely. It left an undeniable legacy. It challenged our habitual perception of reality, protested against just duplicating the world. It foregrounded how film, as a medium, could imbue inanimate objects and sets with life, letting them speak the subjective vision of characters in distress or gripped by madness.
And you still see its influence, right, in later genres.
Definitely. Techniques like unrealistic sets, theatrical composition, dramatic lighting, self-conscious camera work, they continue to influence surrealist film, avant-garde cinema, horror films, and especially American film noir in the 1940s and 50s. That moody, stylized look owes a huge debt to German Expressionism.
You know, digging into the Shining's architecture and then seeing the deliberate distortion in German Expressionism, it really makes you think differently about buildings and film. It makes you wonder, do entire architectural styles carry their own kind of cinematic baggage?
That's a great question.
Like, does modernism always symbolize the same thing on screen? Or is it more complex than that? Let's talk about modernism for a bit. It seems to swing between representing individuality and progress and then embodying coldness or sterility.
It's definitely complex. And yes, film has very frequently used architecture, especially modernist architecture, as a kind of visual shorthand to illustrate the inner lives of characters. It often reflects their psychology, sometimes without a word being spoken.
And you see this fascinating push and pull in how modernism is portrayed. You mentioned King Vidor's The Fountainhead from 1949.
Yeah, that film absolutely championed modernism for its individualist promise, its entrepreneurial vision, its connection to technological progress. It was presented as heroic, bold, forward thinking.
But then, just, 9 years later, you get Jacques Tati's Mon Oncle.
Which completely ridiculed it for the exact same reasons. It poked fun at the perceived sterility, the often confusing or impersonal aspects, the obsession with gadgets over human connection. It's a brilliant satire.
What seems really interesting is that juxtaposition filmmakers explore modernism's clean, often sterile lines against the messiness and vitality of actual human life.
Yes, you see that explored beautifully in films like Columbus from 2017, which uses modernist landmarks almost like characters themselves. And in the 60s work of Michelangelo Antonioni, like L'Eclisse, these films often use the starkness of modern architecture to highlight human emotions, anxieties, imperfections. It makes the concrete feel ironically organic, or at least a counterpoint to the organic.
And this symbolic use goes deep into character exploration. Take Yorgos Lanthimos' The Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Yeah.
That film uses modern architecture and interior design in really striking symbolic ways.
Absolutely. Those hospital scenes, notice all the glass walls, the reflections, they create this cool, almost chilling effect that perfectly mirrors the characters' emotional detachment and the way they observe each other.
And there's a bedroom scene, I remember, where the light and shadow are used so precisely.
Yeah, to show how the couple, Colin Farrell and Nicole Kidman's characters, only reveal certain parts of themselves to each other, hiding things in the shadows, literally and metaphorically, reflecting their hidden complexities, their anxieties.
The film also had that powerful contrast between their house, this grand, beautiful, crisp, white, modern house, and its drab, unfinished basement.
Right. And that basement becomes the space where these outwardly clean suburbanites have to confront these really dark, deep emotions and make terrible moral choices. The symbolism is pretty clear, isn't it?
Yeah, the pristine surface hides the darkness underneath, just like the characters themselves.
Exactly. The terrible things are housed deep down in the foundations, just like they're housed deep down in their souls once that veneer of civility cracks.
And the film uses stairs a lot, too. Characters constantly moving up and down between floors.
Which visually represents their struggle, moving between different levels of morality as they navigate these increasingly impossible ethical dilemmas. It's a constant visual metaphor woven into the very structure of their home.
You see similar ideas in Ruben Östlund's films, too, right? Like Force Majeure or The Square.
Definitely. In Force Majeure, those hotel hallways are so clean, so well ordered on the outside, but behind each door, they hide these compartmentalized family troubles, these crises.
So it represents that tension between, like, subdued modern humanity and our more wild, basic human instincts.
I think so, yeah. It explores how even in these highly ordered, seemingly perfect environments, primal chaos and deeply human struggles can just erupt and shatter the facade.
You can spot this symbolic use of modern interiors everywhere once you start looking. Nocturnal Animals uses its sleek, often cold interiors brilliantly to reflect the character's inner emptiness or turmoil.
Even animation. The Incredibles and its sequel use modernist architecture and design so effectively to create that specific early 60s Jet Age, optimistic yet slightly dangerous style. It's wonderfully evocative of the characters' emotional states and the film's themes. It just reinforces this idea that the environment isn't just scenery, it's an extension of the story and the people living within it.
Okay, moving from the often sleek lines of modernism, let's tackle brutalism. Now, there's a style that evokes really strong, often conflicting reactions, and its cinematic portrayal seems to reflect that, swinging between these harsh dystopian visions and, more recently, maybe a kind of utopian nostalgia.
It's a perfect example of how an architectural style can carry such different narrative weight depending on the context. Brutalism emerged as this radical style in post-war England, 1950s, then spread globally through the 60s and 70s.
And it's defined by that use of raw concrete, right?
Thumb
brute.
Exactly. Raw, exposed concrete. Initially, it symbolized things like durability, political confidence, authority, post-war reconstruction, building a solid future.
And a key element you often see is the cantilever, that projecting structure.
Yeah, the cantilever is fascinating. This gravity-defying structure, often jutting out boldly, holds this dual nature. On one hand, it embodies openness, utopian ideals, revolution, these dynamic concrete shapes reaching out.
But on the other hand,
there's a strange fragility to it sometimes. It looks like it could collapse at any moment. It's this paradox built in concrete strength and potential instability all at once.
Now, in Western cinema, brutalism often gets a pretty rough ride, doesn't it? Framed in these crushing dystopian visions.
Very often, yes. It frequently gets associated directly with brutality, cruelty, inhumanity, aggression. Think of the towering, cold concrete landscapes in Denis Villeneuve's Blade Runner 2049, representing an oppressive, alienating future.
Or going back further, Kubrick again, with A Clockwork Orange.
Absolutely. Kubrick's use of London locations like the Thamesmead housing estate or that cubic cantilevered lecture building at Brunel University, which became the Ludovico Medical Facility, they're depicted as cold, stylish, but also psychotic. That film really set the template for using brutalism as a symbol of oppressive state power or social decay.
And you see it echoed in 1984. Get Carter with that iconic car park high-rise, The Hunger Games.
The list goes on. Cinematic editing often takes these modular brutalist elements and creates entire cantilever cities, subverting the original utopian vision of architects like Le Corbusier. Instead of unity and progress, these landscapes embody an overpowering government, conveying alienation, uprootedness.
This whole architecture of evil stereotype, it seemed to reflect, maybe even contribute to, brutalism falling out of favor in the West.
It likely played a part, yeah. This cinematic portrayal tapped into anxieties about dehumanization, state control, the loss of individuality. It also connected perhaps to lingering anxieties from the war and definitely the collective anxieties of the Cold War era. These imposing fortress-like structures felt vaguely threatening.
What's really interesting, though, is the contrast with how Soviet cinema treated brutalism, or rather, how it didn't treat it.
It's striking, isn't it? Despite brutalism being quite prevalent in actual Soviet construction, especially later on, there's a surprising absence of it, particularly those dramatic cantilever structures in Soviet films of the era.
Why was that? Was Soviet brutalism different?
It often was, actually. Soviet brutalism drew inspiration from a wider range of sources. Expressionism, science fiction, early European modernism, even Russian suprematism from the revolutionary period. This led to some incredibly idiosyncratic, flamboyant, often imaginative structures, quite different from the more uniform, repetitive stuff often associated with Soviet urban landscapes.
Like echoes of those bold constructivist designs from the 1920s, Tatlin's Tower, Lissitzky's Cloud Irons.
Exactly. Those designs featured bold cantilevers. But constructivism was forbidden under Stalin. While a more functionalist brutalism reemerged post-war, those really imaginative, expressive forms only resurfaced much later, mid to late 70s.
So why weren't those dramatic buildings featured in Soviet films? You'd think they'd be visually interesting.
One hypothesis is that maybe those expressive forms, those cantilevers, were just too open, too individualistic for the dictates of centralized planning, which often prioritized efficiency, cramming as many people into the smallest space possible.
But more importantly, maybe the symbolism was wrong for them.
That's the crucial point. In the Soviet vision, or at least the potential interpretation, expressive brutalism, like the cantilever, was the opposite of the alienating dystopia it represented for the West. It could symbolize revolution, artistic freedom, looking forward.
So depicting those buildings prominently in Soviet films could have posed a symbolic danger. especially in a political climate, emphasizing collectivist uniformity over individual expression.
Precisely. It might have subtly undermined the desired message. It's a fascinating contrast in interpretation.
But now, today, there's this trend in visual culture from the former Eastern Bloc, this ruined cinema, that looks back at these decaying brutalist buildings quite differently.
Yes, it often fetishizes them, but in a complex way. You see it in documentaries like Soviet modernism, brutalism, postmodernism, or Belgrade, a brutalist jewel, or that one about the Buzlutsa monument in Bulgaria, the UFO of communism.
And how do they frame these buildings, not as failures?
Often not. This approach captures their sculptural beauty, heightens the geometrical forms. It conveys a sense of abstract beauty, even grandeur, despite the decay. It opens up a space for a kind of utopian nostalgia.
Nostalgia for the lost dreams they represented.
Exactly. It highlights the sharp contrast between the man-made edifice and the surrounding nature, or the emptiness around them. These isolated structures become symbols of inaccessibility, the loneliness of modern life, but also this romantic predicament, a sadness over lost utopian aspirations. It's a complete inversion of the Western dystopian narrative, finding melancholy beauty in the concrete ruins.
Okay, so we've really established how architecture itself acts like a character, carrying all this symbolic weight. But let's get practical. How do filmmakers actually do this? What's in their architectural toolkit? Let's dive into the techniques, maybe starting with cinematography and composition, how they frame the built environment.
Absolutely. Cinematography is key. It's everything involved in capturing the image, the type of camera, the film stock or digital sensor, the lighting techniques, how the camera moves. It's crucial for capturing these designed environments effectively.
It's how the director and the director of photography translate that three-dimensional space onto the flat screen, right? Deciding not just what we see, but how we see it.
Precisely. And within cinematography, how the frame is composed, the arrangement of elements within that rectangle is one of the most vital aspects. It's not just about what's in the shot, but how it's arranged, balanced, and presented to guide your eye and your emotions.
And when you think of a director whose signature style is almost defined by composition, especially symmetry.
Wes Anderson has to be the prime example, right? His films often feel like these perfectly arranged dollhouses or intricate dioramas. Everything is meticulously set up, staged, usually with this almost obsessive symmetry. It creates a very distinct, controlled, often whimsical or melancholic world.
And that meticulous composition ties directly into blocking, doesn't it? Where the actors are placed within that frame, how they interact with the environment.
Exactly. Blocking is the choreography of actors within the space. In Anderson's The Royal Tenenbaums, think about Margot, Gwyneth Paltrow's character, the sullen outcast. In group shots, she's consistently placed way in the back or off to the side,
Visually isolating her.
instantly conveying her emotional distance without needing dialogue. Or in Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, remember the scenes inside the little submarine. The character's physical proximity to Bill Murray's Zissou, their seating arrangement, subtly reflects their emotional closeness or distance from him.
It's a silent language of relationships. And blocking can convey power too, can it? Like standing versus sitting.
Sure, someone standing might appear more confident or dominant than someone sitting. Someone positioned lower or smaller in the frame might seem weaker or more vulnerable. It's a constant visual negotiation of hierarchy and emotion within the composed space.
But Anderson's use of blocking is very precise, often for character detail or a kind of deadpan humor. Yeah. Other directors use it differently.
Oh, absolutely. Think about Francis Ford Coppola in The Godfather. The blocking and staging are masterful in representing shifting power dynamics. Who sits where at the table, who stands in the doorway, who's in shadow, who's in light. It instantly tells you who's gaining or losing influence. It really emphasizes that there's no single correct way to approach mise en scène. It's all about the director's vision and what they want to communicate through the visual arrangement.
So beyond where the characters stand in these carefully designed spaces, the atmosphere itself is hugely shaped by light, isn't it?
Fundamentally, lighting is inherently emotional. The intensity, the quality, hard or soft, the direction, the color, it all profoundly affects the mood of a scene.
Back to Wes Anderson, The Grand Budapest Hotel, the lighting changes dramatically, right?
It does. For the vibrant, whimsical scenes set in the hotel's heyday, the lighting is often soft, warm, almost glowing, capturing that fleeting sense of grandeur and nostalgia. But then, for scenes involving violence or menace, it shifts, becoming harsher, more shadowed, intensifying the darker moments, and making the violence feel even more jarring against the overall pastel palette.
So all these elements, camera, composition, blocking, lighting, they're all working together within the foundation of the film's visual world, which is the set design itself, creating the physical environments we see. It's an incredible art form with a rich history.
It really is. Set design, or scenic design, its roots go way back to theater, obviously, but its transition into film during the silent era was huge. Films like Caligari showed just how powerful set design could be, not just as a backdrop, but as an integral part of the storytelling, expressing mood and theme.
And then the golden age of Hollywood, the 30s to the 50s, with Technicolor.
That transformed everything. Suddenly you had vibrant color schemes. Think Gone with the Wind or The Wizard of Oz. Iconic designers like Cedric Gibbons at MGM or William Cameron Menzies, who basically invented the role of production designer on Gone with the Wind, left this incredible legacy shaping the look of countless classic films.
Then things shifted again, didn't they? Towards more realism.
Yeah, from the 60s onwards, there was often a move towards more realism, sets reflecting social contexts, like in The Graduate. And then, of course, technology just kept revolutionizing things. CGI, computer-generated imagery, opened up possibilities for creating worlds that were previously unimaginable. Think of the fantastical landscapes in Avatar or the massive cityscapes in superhero movies. It's this constant evolution of craft and technology.
So how does it actually happen? What's the process of designing a set? It sounds incredibly complex.
It is a complex, multi-stage journey. It usually starts with conceptualization. The production designer reads the script, maybe multiple times, starts brainstorming ideas, absorbing the mood, the characters, the period. They'll create rough sketches, mood boards with visual references, photographs, paintings, architectural drawings.
Like for Gone with the Wind, figuring out the look of Tara and 12 Oaks, those iconic southern plantation houses, setting the scene for the whole era.
Exactly. Those initial concepts are crucial. Then comes design development. Those rough ideas evolve into more detailed plans. This could involve architectural drawings, scale models, 3D digital models, detailed renderings. For a film like Inception, the production designer Guy Hendricks Dias and his team used both traditional techniques and cutting-edge digital tools to design those mind-bending, shifting dreamscapes, balancing the practical needs with the fantastical vision.
Then they have to get approval, right,
Yep.
before building anything.
Right. There are pre-production meetings. The production designer presents their detailed designs to the director, the cinematographer, other key department heads. They discuss feasibility, can this actually be built on budget and on schedule, make necessary adjustments, and finalize the look for each set. Imagine the discussions for Mad Max, Fury Road, coordinating those incredible vehicle designs with the dystopian desert sets.
And then the hammers start swinging.
Pretty much. That's the construction phase, the physical building of the sets. This involves carpenters, painters, sculptors, plasterers, decorators, a whole army of craftspeople. It might also involve scouting and modifying real locations.
You mentioned the Grand Budapest Hotel earlier. That was a huge build, wasn't it?
Phenomenal. Production designer Adam Stockhausen and his team transformed a vacant former department store in Germany into the main hotel lobby and other interiors. They built intricate stairways, elevators, huge atriums, all in that specific 1913 Jugendstil style. And for the exterior shots, they used beautifully crafted miniature models. The scale and detail were just breathtaking.
Wow. And once the structure is built, it's not finished, is it?
Not at all. The final crucial step is dressing the set. This is where the set decorators come in, placing all the furniture, the props, the curtains, the pictures on the wall, all those tiny details that make the environment feel lived in, authentic, and reflective of the characters and their emotional states.
Like the perfect placement of objects in American Beauty to symbolize the character's repression or desires.
Exactly. Is the space tidy or messy? Luxurious or sparse? Every choice tells a story. And throughout this entire process, from concept to final dressing, there's constant collaboration. The production designer is always talking to the director, the cinematographer about how things will be lit and shot, the costume designer, the props master. It's a deeply collaborative art form.
Looking ahead, you mentioned the future of set design is evolving rapidly. Virtual realities, sustainability. But what does that actually look like? Is it changing the fundamentals?
It's definitely changing the process and opening up new possibilities. One major development is using virtual reality, VR, and augmented reality, AR, in pre-visualization or pre-vis.
So designers can walk through a digital version of the set before it's built.
Exactly. They can create and modify sets entirely in a digital space. Directors and cinematographers can plan shots, experiment with camera angles inside this virtual set, It saves a huge amount of time and money compared to building physical mock-ups and offers incredible flexibility, especially for complex action sequences or fantasy environments. We saw this used effectively on films like John Wick, Chapter 3.
And then there are those giant LED walls, like on The Mandalorian.
Yes, that's another game changer. Real-time rendering of backgrounds using LED volumes or walls. It's often called virtual production. Instead of green screens, you have these massive curved LED screens displaying incredibly realistic, dynamic digital environments behind the actors on a physical set piece.
And the background reacts to the camera.
Instantly. The perspective shifts. The lighting changes realistically based on the camera's movement and the physical lights on set. It blurs the line between practical sets and digital visual effects in a way that's really revolutionary. It gives actors a real environment to react to, and the results can be seamless.
What else is on the horizon? AI, holograms.
We can probably expect more integration of AI and machine learning, perhaps automating certain design tasks, generating complex textures, or predicting lighting scenarios. Maybe holography could eventually allow for interactive, three-dimensional set elements right there on stage. Who knows?
And sustainability is becoming more important, too.
Definitely. There's a growing focus on using eco-friendly materials, reusing and recycling set components, reducing waste. The industry is becoming much more conscious of its environmental footprint, so the future looks like an exciting mix of technological innovation and greater responsibility. Designers will be able to dream bigger, perhaps, but also build smarter and greener.
Okay, let's totally flip the script now. We've spent a lot of time on how architecture shapes film. But what about the other way around? Can film actually teach architects how to design better? This brings us to this idea of cinematic pedagogy.
It's a fascinating area, yeah. Using film itself as an educational tool in architectural design studios, the idea is to force students to reconsider their standard ways of working and thinking about space. One approach comes from an architect who is also a video artist, bringing those two perspectives together.
So how does it work? Do students just watch movies?
It's more structured than that. Imagine teaching architecture students to read a building not just as structure and function, but as if it were a potential film set. The first stage involves analyzing iconic film scenes. A classic example is the Odessa Steppe sequence from Eisenstein's battleship Potemkin.
Okay, and they break it down how?
Using storyboards, architectural plans, sections, they analyze the spatial cinematographic construction. How did Eisenstein use the stairs, the camera angles, the editing, the montage to deconstruct the unity of both the space and the action? To create that incredible emotional impact, it reveals how directors manipulate our perception of space.
So they learn the director's tricks for manipulating space. Then what?
Stage 2. They investigate a real architectural site. Say, the Sabata Market in Madrid was used in one workshop, but instead of using traditional sketchbooks or measuring tapes, they use a film camera.
To film the market.
Yes, but not just to document it. The goal is to deliberately identify its hidden cinematographic characteristics, its filmic potential. They call this spatial filming. It's not about telling a story, it's a formal exercise. Using tilted frames, multiple viewpoints, unusual angles to distort perspective, to make the familiar space look visually interesting, even strange, on film.
Trying to see the everyday through a camera lens, make it unfamiliar again.
Exactly. This process leads to what the researcher calls spatial defamiliarization. It's like looking at something you see every day, but from a completely new angle, maybe upside down or through a prism. Suddenly you notice features, relationships, qualities you never saw before. Film becomes that prism, revealing inherent cinematographic qualities of the space that were always there, just hidden by habit. Film becomes a tool for reinterpreting space itself.
Okay, that's mind-bending. How do they then bridge that back to actually designing buildings?
Stage 3 involves applying these cinematic lessons directly. Students are asked to storyboard film scenes they analyze, like that Potemkin mutiny, but set them within their own architectural design project site, which might also be the Sabata Market if that's their project.
So they have to figure out how to stage the Potemkin scene in the market.
Right, which forces them to examine the architectural settings specifically for cinematographic characteristics that would facilitate that scene's recreation. Does it have dramatic stairs, long corridors, areas of light and shadow? This directs their attention specifically to the site's cinematic potential rather than just its purely functional or structural architectural qualities. It goes beyond just visual recording and starts applying cinematic thinking to design problems.
And they move beyond existing film scenes.
Yes, Stage 4 uses program-specific storyboards. These aren't based on famous movies, but on typical actions related to their own architectural project. So if the project is a small sports stadium, they might storyboard how the basketball teams enter the court or how spectators find their seats.
And how do they film this?
This stage often uses a continuous style of filming, think long takes, a moving camera following the action. Students document these camera movements in plan and section drawings, again, analyzing the space from a cinematographic perspective. How does the space feel when you move through it like a camera?
And this yields actual design ideas.
Directly applicable ideas, yes. Things like noticing how frontal or backlighting could dramatically emphasize movement down a corridor, or how changing the floor finish could guide people or define zones in a way inspired by how a tracking shot moves through different areas in a film. It's where the cinematic vision starts to directly inform practical design decisions.
Okay, so they've analyzed film spaces, storyboarded actions. How do they finally translate this into architectural proposals? What are the strategies?
The research identifies three main strategies for this transference from film to architecture. The first, and most basic, is direct incorporation. This is where a student might apply a specific lighting effect they saw in a film, or a particular floor finish or color palette, directly into their architectural proposal. It shows an understanding of set design, of mise en scène, but it's fairly superficial.
Like saying, I like the blue light in that sci-fi movie, so I'll put blue lights in my corridor.
Kind of, yeah. The second level is more creative, the strategy of analogy. Here, architectural effects are based on cinematographic techniques like the long take, the cut, or the fade.
Okay, that sounds more abstract. Give me an example. How can a wall be like a fade?
A really clever example given is designing a glass wall that isn't uniformly transparent. Instead, it gradually becomes transparent along its length. So as you walk alongside it, the interior of the building is slowly revealed to you, mimicking the way a scene might be revealed through an introductory fade-in a movie.
Ah, I see. So it's translating a time-based visual effect from film into a spatial experience that unfolds as you move.
Exactly. It involves applying this double language of film and architecture. The designer is literally thinking about the spatial experience in cinematic terms. It's a much deeper level of engagement.
And the third, most abstract level.
That's the conceptual strategy of transference. Here, the cinematic effects being translated into architectural design are really spatial concepts rather than just visual effects. This requires a greater level of adaptation, of abstraction. And the impact on the architectural project is often much more fundamental, sometimes challenging standard architectural conventions.
Okay, this sounds powerful. What's an example here?
One example used the filming style of the French director Jean Renoir as inspiration. Renoir was known for his use of long takes and deep space compositions, staging actions simultaneously in different planes of depth, within the frame, foreground, middle ground, background, often connected by camera movement.
So how does that translate to architecture?
It inspired the design of a thin, long lobby space with lineal ramps connecting different levels. These elements emphasize movement through the space and optically unify those different depth planes, directly mimicking how Renoir guided the viewer's eye and created a sense of interconnected space within his shots.
Wow. And there was another Renoir-inspired idea
Yeah.
about camera movement.
Yes. Renoir often used a very free 360-degree movement style for his camera. It could move all around the action, not just observing from one side. This inspired a stadium design that completely inverted standard practice.
How so? Stadiums usually have vertical access, right? Stairs and elevators up to your section.
Exactly. This design proposed horizontal access routes instead. Spectators could walk around the entire perimeter of the court on interconnected walkways, allowing views from all angles without the spatial interruption of typical vertical circulation course.
That's a fundamental rethinking of how a stadium works, directly inspired by how a camera moves in a Renoir film.
Precisely. It represents rethinking architectural conventions as a direct result of thinking through the medium of film, prioritizing continuous flow and multiple perspectives over segmented efficiency.
Now, these students' designs, they might not be perfect practical buildings right away.
No, the paper acknowledges they might have problems and some contradictions at the level of traditional architectural design, but the point is they significantly enrich their design vocabulary.
Learning to think about a wall as a fade or a change in scale as a cut.
That represents a major hybridization of the designer's imagination. It's a lot to absorb, but the potential payoff is huge. It can fundamentally change how you approach spatial problems.
And when students actually reconsider a standard architectural system, like the stadium circulation, based on cinematic ideas, that's breaking down rigid ways of thinking.
It's a powerful example of what educational theorists call constructivist learning. Old frameworks, old design schemata are broken down, and new mental frameworks are developed. It truly highlights the creative potential of this kind of interdisciplinary approach to teaching spatial design, making us reevaluate how we perceive, design, and interact with space itself.
Wow, okay, so we've really covered a lot of ground today. We journeyed through how architecture truly breathes life into cinematic narratives. From the psychological maze of the Overlook Hotel.
To the expressive distortions of German Expressionism and those complex, contrasting portrayals of brutalism, dystopian nightmares versus utopian nostalgia.
We also peeled back the layers of mise en scène and the incredible craft of set design, revealing the meticulous work behind the screen.
And then we flipped it, exploring how film itself, through cinematic pedagogy, can directly inform and even transform architectural thinking and design.
It's really clear that the built environment, whether it's a real location or a constructed set, is this powerful, silent collaborator in storytelling.
Absolutely. It doesn't just passively hold the action. It shapes it, reflects character, evokes emotion, and sometimes it actively drives the plot. It's this unspoken language that profoundly impacts our experience of film.
So maybe the next time you settle in for a movie, or honestly even just walk through a building in your daily life, consider this. What stories might the walls be whispering? What emotions are the spaces around you designed to evoke? And how is the very fabric of the environment actively shaping your experience in ways that go well beyond what just meets the eye?
It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us on this one.